On April 20th, 1805, a dark shadow was cast over the young life of Arthur Schopenhauer. His father, Floris Schopenhauer, took his own life, leaving Arthur to grapple with the heavy burden of grief and loss. This tragic event would etch itself into the psyche of young Schopenhauer, profoundly shaping his worldview and philosophical musings. Arthur Schopenhauer, born in 1788, was a philosopher who stood apart from his contemporaries. By the tender age of 25, he had already obtained his doctorate, showcasing a brilliance that promised much to the world of philosophy. Yet, beneath this intellectual prowess lay a soul tormented by the specters of his early years. The loss of his father, coupled with the subsequent hardships faced by his family, instilled in him a deep-seated pessimism that would come to characterize his philosophical outlook. Schopenhauer's philosophy was heavily influenced by his belief in the futility and suffering inherent in human existence. He saw life as a ceaseless striving, a never-ending pursuit of desires that ultimately leads to suffering. This bleak view extended to his perception of women, whom he regarded with a disdain that was as intense as it was controversial. In Schopenhauer's eyes, women were the embodiment of deception and malevolence. He saw them as creatures driven by a base, animalistic instinct, whose primary function was to ensnare men through their sexuality. To Schopenhauer, women were the eternal source of illusion, the sirens whose seductive calls led men astray from the path of reason and virtue. Schopenhauer did not mince words when it came to his critique of women. He saw them as fundamentally inferior to men, both intellectually and morally. In his essay On Women, he describes them as childish, frivolous, and short-sighted, lacking the capacity for higher reasoning and abstract thought. For Schopenhauer, women were bound by their nature to be deceitful, using their wiles to manipulate men and fulfill their own selfish desires. This harsh view was not merely theoretical for Schopenhauer, it permeated his personal interactions as well. He remained unmarried throughout his life, maintaining a distance from romantic entanglements that he believed would only lead to misery and distraction. His relationships with women were marked by suspicion and contempt, a reflection of his belief that they were incapable of genuine loyalty or intellectual companionship. To support Schopenhauer's position, one might point to the societal norms and gender roles of his time, which often placed women in positions of subservience and limited their opportunities for education and intellectual development. Schopenhauer, living in such an era, might have seen these roles as evidence of inherent differences between the sexes rather than the result of social constructs. Moreover, Schopenhauer's philosophical framework, which emphasized the irrational and destructive nature of desire, naturally extended to his views on women. He saw sexual attraction as a powerful, yet ultimately detrimental force, leading men to act against their own best interests. Women, as the object of this attraction, became in his mind the root of much of the world's suffering. Schopenhauer's disdain for women can also be viewed as a reflection of his broader misanthropy. He held a generally dim view of humanity, believing that life was characterized by endless suffering and strife. In this context, his negative views on women are consistent with his overall pessimism and his belief in the inherent corruption of human nature. Arthur Schopenhauer's view of women was undeniably harsh and critical. His perception of them as sources of deception and evil, driven by base instincts, was a reflection of his broader philosophical beliefs about the nature of desire and suffering. While his views may seem extreme and unjust by modern standards, they were deeply rooted in his personal experiences and the societal context of his time. Schopenhauer's life, marked by tragedy and intellectual brilliance, ultimately gave rise to a philosophy that continues to provoke thought and debate to this day.